ideas are sort of probably moving through most lead agencies and how they're trying to align their clinical record with their assessment tools. But again, this is a long game, and it's going to suck. It's going to suck if the government wipes all this out, because lots of us have just got the groundwork on the ground. That's the part that's disappointing. It's not who's in government, like who gives a crap. But it's that they're going to rip apart what all the foundational stuff, because all of us have been doing. We've had the same thing, and we moved from SIMS, which was a debt client record, to EMHware as well. A lot of the province and the whole northern region got together and made that decision together. I mean, the whole northern region now has a data group that is looking at how we can have the same data elements in EMHware so that our data is, and none of these are 6 course lead agencies, 6 service delivery areas. So that lots of stuff has happened in different areas that is just fantastic. And we're all in different places of that, whether you've worked on engagement, like that's one of the things my agency has worked on, is client engagement. Like,
yeah, I noticed that was a priority, right?
Huge priority in my organization. Well, I can't speak for anyone else. It has been one of the priorities. I lead it. I love it. It's the highlight of my job, is meeting with parents and youth and really working that and really moving that agenda forward. And I think the hard part will be, and I can't speak for the other organizations on the phone or really broadly at the other 29 of us, but our goals, if I was looking at my goals, that's why I was getting up, besides that I don't sit still for very long, are very aspirational, are very long game oriented. So for example, one of our goals is about improving flow for kids and families. One of our goals is about addressing and eliminating systemic racism. I know. One of them is about building a residential system in Northern Ontario. They're very aspirational goals, but it's the year-to-year tactics that lay the foundation for those goals. It's getting in the engagement across. It's lining up your tools. We use CANS, not InterRI, but I would be willing to go to InterRI as well if our whole province said, let's do it together. I would be totally okay with that. I'm not, I wouldn't give up CANS because we use it across our other programs, but I would put the InterRI in a second if our whole province is going to work together. Lots of those conversations are happening, and at the it's like putting the floorboards on your house or building the foundation, but we haven't got to any of the walls yet. I don't know if that makes sense. Like we're all over, but we're all trying to lay seeds of the foundation so that we can build the walls.
Right. And so it's in a later question, but that's a really good piece around how does that come together? I think I read somewhere about a ministry, like the more that you're working you mentioned it earlier, working in partnership with the ministry, and whether there's a ministry lead agency planning table where you're actually talking about these, so you're not sort of working at it, one at a time, and then like how's that coming together or not?
I think we have, oh, go ahead, Diane.
No, I'm just saying, are you talking about at the provincial level or the local level?
Well, I think you were talking at the local level, but then you just mentioned sort of the provincial level. So I wondered if there was that dovetail, like, is there that kind of oversight?
Well, the ministry sit at my planning table, like the ministry, MCYS program supervisor and the LIN sit at my planning table, but at the provincial level and at a regional level, we meet with the ministry, the lead agencies, and at a provincial level, the lead agency consortium meets with the ministry.
Okay. So
in my experience, it's at all levels. That's my experience.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, they sit at our local table as well.
So is there some, that's what I'm sort of wondering, is there some coordination happening? It sounds like, so you're both giving good examples of some initiatives that you're putting together that you're trying to do. And, are you sharing that? So you're talking about that at your local level with partners. Are you also talking about that provincially so that people are aware of what each other's doing and there's kind of like a coordinated effort forward?
It's probably not as formalized as it could be.
Okay.
I think at the provincial level, it's really looking at the big systems pieces as opposed to what's happening on the ground regionally or locally. there are opportunities to share that. The community of practice probably that we have with
Okay.
professionals coming together, that's probably where some of the clinical, that the things that are on the ground are shared a little bit more than at the consortium. We're really at the forest level.
Right.
But it is moving in, or was moving in, a great direction. And the partnership table, which the consortium and the corporate are sitting together at, has made significant movement in the last 3 years since we started as lead agency. That there is a real relationship that had formed. Again, that will be now different people,
Right.
government. So who knows how that will take shape? And there may be some people similar, or they may be all tossed and replaced. Who knows?
That's the worry, right? Greg, can you talk a little bit about your agency and what you're doing that way?
Implementation, yeah, it's I'll try and make it short because there's so much going on. We've just released our full Renfrew County mental health and addiction plan in February of this year, and moving on implementation. So like Vanier, the database was huge for us, and actually the systems management money helped us to do that shift. And so we have EMHware and Interi. It's well integrated and working extremely efficiently. And it's actually reduced, we were able to reduce by 1 admin support because of the efficiencies of workers not having to send things in and have data inputted. They do it all directly. At the planning table level in the plan itself, we identified, we had a huge engagement process with youth caregivers and care service providers to understand what they saw as the current system. Had some really good feedback, and did see some differences between the larger and smaller communities. A large community for us is 15,000, and small community would be 200, some even smaller than that. We identified 17 priority areas from feedback, and wisely selected 3 of those to say, let's move on 3, and then we will take up the rest later on, knowing that there's also a ripple effect that as we move on the first 3, probably half of the others will have some impact in a positive manner. So we chose intake access, very similar to what's happened in most of the province, pathways to care, and our crisis system. So we had an opportunity to create work groups, delve into each of those areas a little bit deeper. We've adopted connecting everyone to the right door approach. So not a single doorway to intake, but creating community of practice where intake workers have now come together, and anybody coming into an agency asking for mental health or addictions help, it's our job to do a warm handover. They stay with us until we get them to the right door.
Okay.
So that's now just moving into implementation. I would think by October, we should have most of the organizations actually utilizing that. We have our crisis system. We had issues with people not being connected, going into emergency, sometimes walking out before they were seen because they waited for 5 hours. Sometimes being seen, stabilized, and then demitted, but not connected to any agency, or being recommended to go an agency, but no one knew whether they did or they didn't. So feedback systems weren't in place. So we've created a fairly simple, efficient, and effective system. So the adult system, which has a mobile crisis team, is a single door out of emergency. So they agreed to accept all ages into their mandate. So if there's a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, it doesn't matter. And they will accept all referrals from emergency rooms, and then do the warm handover depending on which agency it needs to go to. But basically it's under 17 under goes to us. Over 17 will go to one of 2 or 3 different service providers. We will be adopting Heads ED for the kids side in terms of the management, I guess the decision trees that exist, the templates, and the common assessments, risk assessments that can take place. And there's an adult model from the states that the adult system is adopting that will be utilized for the whole adult system on risk assessment. We are further looking at other forms that we can try and make in common. And we have no database right now to understand what's happening around crisis in or out of hospitals. So we're trying to create a baseline and a data system with protocols between the 5 different hospitals in our area, actually plus CHEO 6 and ROH 7 hospitals that sort of are part of our system to share some level of information so we can actually report on do we have improvements or not. And we have a flagging system. There are a fair number of individuals who are in emergency rooms for mental health issues more than 3 times a year. They absorb a lot of energy. And why that is, we're not sure, but we can trigger at any time, any agency can trigger a basically integrated planning system using a situation table that we have existing in the area already to really create a more integrated plan for those people who are the returners. And we have our pathways to care. We're looking at common templates, the warm handover, and again, just trying to create some, we're in the process of trying to determine what are the hard targets around things like wait times. There should be no wait time in crisis. It's within 24 hours, how to monitor that. Wait times overall. Integrating some, we have several walk-ins. We have walk-in, another organization has walk-in. Actually 5 organizations have walk-ins. We're trying to look at a more integrated model so we can maybe do a either cooperative walk-ins where we have multi-service, or we stop doing a walk-in in Deep River because it's already been done. So just in the midst of that. So those are some of the major pieces that are taking place. And then of course work with, one of the things that we recognize is work with the Indigenous populations. We had a sector that includes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And we recognize after our year of working with them, they're really very different. And we've actually created 3 sectors instead of 1. So there's a very separate sector for each, with a voice coming from each to help guide us. So those are the highlights.
Wow, you're doing a lot. I'm just trying to catch up there with notes. And you know, it's really helpful to get those examples on, and I guess it's sort of back to what Diane's saying, like this long-term planning. You've got, you know, I think you said 13 and 17, and you prioritize 3, and it sounds like you're making good headway on those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else so thank you. You've all given good examples, and I know some of you, like, you might have just scratched the surface. Are there other things you want to sort of highlight before we leave this area? And maybe just any, if there's challenges or opportunities with those that you haven't said that you'd like to highlight as well.
Well, I think one of the challenges in the northern areas is around planning and services in the rural aspects of our region. Because, and I think I said this, I happen to just, you know, I'm dealing with 40 or 50,000 square miles or 100,000 square kilometers. I mean, so is Kenora, so is Algoma. We're all in those great big geographies, and you have very small communities with lots of space in between. And I know rural Southern Ontario has rurality too, but there's rurality and then there's sparse reality. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think that is one of
you're definitely the queen of rurality up there.
Well, I appreciate that rural Southern Ontario has issues too, like, and so does Toronto has issue, and we all have. But one of the challenges, if you look at it as a provincial, is how do you get equity across the province? And that's one of our goals in our core services plan, is equity of services. And so again, and this is interesting listening to Greg, we've done some concrete things. We've implemented EMHware, we've done some of the cans, but we were doing that anyway. I can attach it onto my, that's kind of fun. And the funny part is I can attach whatever I do onto whatever bucket I need. I attach some onto the AGO report, I attach some onto lead agency, I attach some onto my strat plan. I mean, that's a good goal when I can attach the outcomes of all those goals onto different buckets of requirements, right?
Yes.
But, because you have all that crap too, right? We know about the AGO. So some of the stuff we did for the AGO actually lined up with our strat plan, lined up with you know, whatever other millions of plans CEOs operate with. But I do think that there is a unique challenge in some of the very rural northern areas like mine, but I even have it easier in some ways because I have a big city with a big hospital and a big, like 85% of my population lives in my city. That's an advantage for for my metropolitan piece, but that's a disadvantage for the other 17% of the people. So there's differential challenges, but that's been one of the challenges we're just scratching our head at on how to create equity in children's mental health in small communities. I just don't have the answer, and the truth is people don't want to live in those communities, so you can't get professionals up there.
Right.
Particularly with the human resource problem that we're starting to face in Ontario, they don't even want to go more, or they want more money to go. I mean, that's probably in lots of rural areas, but that becomes compounded with the geography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like that's a real challenge, right? And
I'm not just mine, but any of what that has.
Yeah.
The other challenge for us, and I know is the Indigenous services, but again, Northwestern Ontario and Northern Ontario has particularly high percentage of population. And so, for example, you are constantly trying to figure out how to have relationships that are both part of the healing and truth and reconciliation process while concurrently trying to move your own agenda forward. And so it's a bit of a dance around some of those issues, which of course is, if you have newcomers, we didn't have a whole bunch of newcomers or a whole bunch of refugees, we had a few. So those issues weren't big for us to suddenly have to deal with. We had some, but nothing on the scales that Southern Ontario saw. But we have different issues, and some which are very political with the Indigenous. So Thunder Bay is a hub for 3 provincial territory organizations, and they all don't get along. And they would say that to each other. So NAN and Superior Robinson Superior and Treaty 3 don't see things the same way, yet they all use the services that are centralized in Southern Thunder Bay. So it's very complicated politically.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier or a challenge to move things forward.
Sure.
Thanks, Diane. I appreciate that northern perspective, putting that in the rural piece. It's important, eh? And I can think of even, we had the shortages of psychiatry using video conference, and that was even
we have 1 psychiatrist for all of Northwestern Ontario.
Yeah, wow. That's a challenge.
Who really needs a psychiatrist?
Yeah. Joanne and Leo and Jeff, anything else that you want to add before we go back to this? I know you started off on some things, you talked about the data, and you talked about your Syrian refugees, and anything else in some of the database you're using. Anything else you wanted to highlight before we move on?
Rose, I can just send you the list of all the priority stuff that we've got here.
Okay.
Just for reference. I think the challenge is once you identify priorities, they don't disappear when you identify new priorities.
Okay.
You've got a pack of priorities that you're trying to drag along behind you or push out in front of you. And I'm not sure, I guess it's part of the long game picture that Diane and Greg are talking about. I'm not sure that any of them ever totally stop from being a priority if you pick big ones. Concrete ones, yes, I think you could gain some traction with that, but the bigger picture stuff is definitely going to follow us for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. So these are ongoing. It's not like they're neat and tidy and you can, finish it in a certain time period or anything, right? And they involve so many other people. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And the list would be great.
Sure.
Thank you, Joanne.
With the data, there is a huge opportunity because at this moment, I could not tell you how many unique individuals are served in London Middlesex. And
okay.
The hope with having the BI solution and having this one of the things the MACI, which is the piece that brings together the INTERI across. The hope of these kind of integrating systems is that we will now be able to answer some basic questions like how many kids are we serving?
Okay. So there's still, because I read that in I think it was, I don't know which report, but that there were, people felt they were making headway around, trying to collect data, but there were challenges with it in terms of what the quality of what you're actually being able to gather and use.
Yes, and there's a lot of